So what happens when the very people sworn to uphold the law are accused of weaponizing it? Today, we're going to dive into a really tangled case out of Arkansas, where a simple fight over a family home spiraled into this multi-year battle against the justice system itself. We're talking about a phantom warrant, alleged police misconduct, and the very idea of justice being put on trial.
You know, this one sentence right here, allegedly spoken by a police officer, is pretty much the key that unlocks this entire story. It suggests a warrant isn't some fixed legal order, but more like a light switch that can be flipped on and off whenever someone feels like it. I mean, how is that even possible?
Right? How can a legal document, something with the power to take away your freedom, just vanish, reappear? Well, the legal filings in this case actually have a name for it. They call it a ghost warrant.
All right, first up, let's talk about this so-called ghost warrant.
See, a warrant is supposed to be a real, physical document, signed by a judge and properly filed with the court clerk. But the allegation here is that for years, all that existed was an electronic flag in a crime database. It was basically a digital ghost, you know? It could get you arrested, but without any of the actual legal paperwork that's required to back it up.
And this timeline from the case file really lays out how weird this whole thing is. A warrant gets created in the system way back in December 2020. But then, almost 2 years later, a deputy runs a check on the guy, Dustin Thurmond, and just lets him go. The lawsuit calls this the smoking gun. I mean, if the warrant was legit, why wouldn't you make an arrest? And then, suddenly, the warrant is finally officially filed in March 2023, more than 2 years after it was first used to justify police action.
So you have to ask, why would anyone create a phantom warrant in the first place? Well, the alleged motive has nothing to do with the crime. Nope, it has everything to do with a pretty bitter family fight over an inheritance.
This whole story didn't start with a crime. It started with a death. When Carl Ralph Thurmond passed away in November of 2020, a huge battle kicked off over his property. And that family fight is what allegedly set this entire, unbelievable chain of events into motion.
So if you look at the property deeds, you can really see the heart of the conflict. Around 2014, the deeds clearly named the son, Dustin, as the heir. Simple enough. But then, between 2018 and 2019, brand new deeds were drafted that just cut him out completely. And here's the critical claim from the lawsuit. This all happened after his father was diagnosed with dementia, which raises some really serious questions about whether he was even capable of making a decision that huge.
Okay, and this is where the web starts to get really tangled. The property didn't just go to a random person. It was transferred to the wife of the father's business partner. And the attorney who drafted these new deeds, well, her name is Rhonda Davis, and she just happens to be the sister of the new owner's husband. The lawsuit points to this and says, look, this is a massive conflict of interest where family ties could have completely and improperly influenced a legal matter.
And all of this brings us to the central allegation of the case, a term they use over and over, lawfare in Arkansas.
So what is lawfare? Well, the way it's used in this lawsuit, it describes a really specific strategy. Using the immense power of the criminal justice system, we're talking police, prosecutors, and that ghost warrant, not for justice, but as a weapon to win a totally separate civil fight over property.
The lawsuit basically claims the breaking or entering warrant was a total sham. It alleges the real goal was to label the son as a wanted felon, making it way easier to harass him, arrest him, and legally kick him off the very property he was fighting to prove was his.
So once this legal machine got rolling, the consequences for Dustin Thurmond became incredibly severe. The case file details a series of events that it literally describes as a trial by ordeal. 33. That's how many days Thurmond was allegedly held in jail for contempt of court. And why does that number matter so much? Well, because according to the legal documents, the absolute legal limit for that offense in Arkansas is 30 days.
The court documents describe a scene that is just wild. After Thurmond insists on his right to a trial, the judge orders a surprise drug test on the spot. A sample is collected in a bathroom. But then the bailiff allegedly just glances at the test cup, throws it in the trash, and walks back into the courtroom to announce that Thurmond failed for meth, with no physical evidence to back it up. And just like that, his bond was revoked.
And during his time in jail, the filings allege a really disturbing pattern of medical neglect. He was reportedly denied antibiotics for a serious MRSA infection. He suffered a hypertensive crisis, that's a blood pressure of 215 over 180, and got no follow-up care. And when he had a life-threatening allergic reaction, it allegedly took 4 days for the staff to get him to an emergency room.
So what did it cost to make the whole thing go away? This number, $5,500. It's the amount of restitution Thurman was allegedly coerced into paying to have the original breaking and entering charges dropped, the very charges that kicked this whole thing off.
The criminal case eventually ended with what's called a nolle prosequi. It's just a formal way of saying the prosecutor dropped the charges. But here's the kicker. The dismissal order had a handwritten note on it that's absolutely central to the whole lawfare claim. It says, "At request of victim, restitution has been paid." The lawsuit argues this is stone-cold proof the case was never about justice, but about getting a payout.
But this case isn't just about individual actions. It alleges there's a systemic buddy system at play that even allows these kinds of things to happen.
And that's the obvious question, right? If these allegations are true, how in the world could this happen? Well, the case file points to some long-standing legal structures that it claims protect officials and prevent them from ever being held accountable.
It really comes down to two major legal shields. First, police have something called qualified immunity, which makes it incredibly hard to sue them unless their actions violate a right that's already been clearly established by a previous court case. And then you have absolute immunity for prosecutors, which means you basically can't sue them for their actions during a prosecution, even for alleged misconduct.
The source material also points to other factors that kind of create a perfect storm. Arkansas elects its judges, which can create pressure to favor influential locals. Public defenders are often so swamped with cases, they have no choice but to push for a plea deal instead of a trial. And in small towns, the close relationships between the sheriff, the prosecutor, and the judge can create a system where personal connections might matter more than actual justice.
In the end, this case file really leaves us with a difficult and pretty profound question. It presents a story where the very institutions designed to protect us are accused of harming us, and it forces us all to ask, when the system itself is on trial, who gets to be the judge?